Welcome everybody to SF Climate Week's presentation on how plastics are accelerating the climate crisis. I'm Linda Hutchins Knowles with Climate Action California and delighted to have you all joining us tonight. Wanted to begin with introductions. As I said, I'm Linda Hutchins Knowles and I'm the volunteer coordinator for Climate Action California. Also, in my personal life, I also advocate for natural play surfaces instead of plastic turf. And I'll pass it on to our presenter tonight, Brittany, to introduce herself, and then I will continue presenting Climate Action California.
Hi, everyone. My name's Brittany Friedman. I'm the co-lead for the Plastics and Toxins team here with Climate Action California. I have a master's degree in environmental science and sustainability. I love to paddleboard, and I'm a big national parks explorer.
Thank you. And then I'll just tell a little bit about our organization, Climate Action California, for those who aren't familiar. We are a volunteer-run nonprofit. I'm one of only three staff, and we're not all full-time, so less than three full-time staff that support over 11,000 members, 7,000 of whom are here in California. We advance science-based climate policies through local, state, and federal climate legislation and regulation. And one of our secret sauces is that we train volunteers all the intricacies behind the scenes going on in the legislature and the regulatory agencies. So our volunteers can understand how those processes work and how to influence them, especially at critical moments. We do most of our work on Zoom, as you can see from the photo, because we're spread around the state and different policy teams. Also, we have climate elections. We are working on endorsing climate champions. And we have a capital team that's based in Sacramento, and they go in person to legislative committee hearings to give me-toos. That means public comments on a bill or meet legislators. So we do a lot. It's amazing. And I'm very proud to be part of this organization and glad to have all of you joining us tonight. Brittany is one of the co-leads of the plastic and toxins team that we have. And we'll be telling you at the end a little bit more about that team and how you might want to get involved if you'd like. So with that, I'm going to pass this on to Brittany to kick us off, and I'll come back at the end. Oh, one more thing, next slide. I did just want to say that for the Q&A at the bottom, Brittany will probably say this, but you can start putting questions and answers in the chat, or it's not a chat, it's a Q&A. But if you can't see it, you can log out and go to zoom.us, that's your browser window version, and then when you log back in, you should be able to see the Q&A. So with that, I'll pass it over to Brittany. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Linda. And thanks, everyone, for joining us this evening. Before we get started, I wanted to provide a brief overview of what we'll be covering tonight, beginning with plastics' contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, specifically through the production of plastics, their top producers, and their projected growth. Then we'll dive into how plastics and microplastics are destabilizing the climate across all ecosystems, including the most desolate of regions. And finally, we'll take a look at some ways we can individually and collectively take action towards positive climate solutions. As Linda mentioned, if you have a question during the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A Zoom webinar feature. All right, so since the plastic industry has been hiding its climate impact for decades, this includes the blatant connection between fossil fuels and climate change. So let's unpack plastic production and the lifespan of plastics, beginning with fossil fuels. More than 99% of plastics are made from fossil fuels, with their production closely paralleling oil and gas production. Plastics are made from extracting raw materials, such as cellulose, coal, natural gas, salt, and crude oil. Because crude oil is such a complex material, it needs to be distilled in an oil refinery to separate heavy crude oil into lighter fractions of chemical compounds. This forms both hard and soft plastics. The manufacturing is incredibly energy intensive, with 85% of emissions released from plastic production taking place before the products ever leave the factory floor. Refining plastics emits over 185 million tons of greenhouse gases each year, which is approximately the same amount of the annual emissions of Spain. And keep in mind that 40% of this plastic production is for single-use products. Following production, the transportation emissions from shipping and sales of plastics are noted to be around 5 million tons per year. Only 9% of plastics are then recycled, leaving the remaining plastic waste to be dumped in a landfill, burned, or polluted into the environment. It's estimated that 4.5 million tons of plastic waste enter California landfills each year. When we look at the largest plastic producers and the largest greenhouse gas emitters, we can see that they're the same companies. In fact, 57 companies are linked to 80% of greenhouse gas emissions since 2016, with the top producing companies linked to oil and gas and cement production. ExxonMobil, a US oil company, is the largest contributor to emissions, contributing 2% of the total global greenhouse gas emissions. California and ExxonMobil are currently embroiled in several lawsuits after California Attorney General Rob Bonta made claims that Exxon's so-called plastic recycling program was not based in truth, and that they have a decades-long campaign of deception exacerbating the plastic pollution crisis. Both ExxonMobil and Saudi Aramco have acknowledged that because they anticipate a decline in the demand for oil-based car fuel, they will push expansion of plastic products, with ExxonMobil planning to expand plastic production by 80% by 2050. According to the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, greenhouse gas emissions from plastics are now 4 times higher than that of the aviation industry. A 2019 comparison study shows that global aviation emissions were 0.6 gigatons, whereas plastics emitted 2.26 gigatons, over 5% of total global emissions. Yearly plastic emissions are expected to increase beyond 3.3 gigatons by mid-century, surpassing the 1.5 degrees Celsius climate target. This target comes from the Paris Agreement of 2015, under which 195 nations pledged to hold the Earth's temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius and to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The plastics industry continues to show the strongest production growth of all bulk materials, with plastic production growing nearly 230 times larger than production levels in 1950. Without regulation, both demand and CO2 emissions are projected to double by 2050 and triple by 2100. As we can see on this chart, the average growth rate of plastic production between just 2000 and 2019 was 3.5%. However, when we look at future modeling from the UN Environment Program, we see that a transition built on reuse, recycling, and material redesign could cut plastic pollution levels drastically. You may have heard of chemical recycling or petrochemical recycling. Some companies are pushing this as advanced recycling, but the truth is that these recycling plants currently handle less than 1% of plastic waste generated in the United States. The most common chemical recycling is pyrolysis, which uses high heat and pressure in low oxygen conditions to convert plastic waste back into fossil fuels or other byproducts. Typically, they're sold as fuel to be burned. More than 4,000 chemicals used to make plastics are known to be harmful to human health and the environment. During chemical recycling, these chemicals are released back in the air, polluting the surrounding environment. In addition, carbon emissions released from this process are nearly 22% higher than virgin plastic production. As we move on from plastic production, here are some statistics to keep in mind. 400 million metric tons of plastic are produced globally every year. 40% of all plastic production is for single-use products that are used once and then thrown away. Only 9% of plastics ever made have been recycled, with 12% of that waste being incinerated, releasing into the air toxic pollutants and black carbon. And plastic pollution has been found in every ecosystem on Earth. Now let's take a look at how plastics, and especially microplastics, are destabilizing the climate across all ecosystems. We'll focus more on this in a few slides, but it's important to note that plastics and climate change events continuously negatively impact each other. It's a two-way interaction that begins with plastic production and dwindles down to degraded microplastics infiltrating air, water, ice, and soil. In both terrestrial and aquatic settings, plastics are disrupting the biogeochemical cycles through degradation in their environment. As plastics break down into microplastics, the climate destabilization not only increases, but is far more difficult to remedy. We can't talk about plastic pollution without mentioning microplastics. Microplastics are small plastic particulates that measure less than 5 milliliters in size, typically the size of a pencil eraser. When they're present in water, they can either sink or float depending on what type of plastic they're made of. There are two different types of microplastics. Primary microplastics, like microbeads in beauty or soap products, are intentionally created. Secondary microplastics are broken down from larger plastic items that have been exposed to natural elements when littered or discarded. In our oceans alone, there is an annual global sum of 1.5 million tons of microplastics, which are far more difficult to remove than larger plastics. Microplastics are generated from a variety of materials and sources, including synthetic textiles you might find in your clothing, paint, wet wipes, tea bags, cigarette butts, laundry and dishwasher pods, tires, glitter, microbeads, and general household plastic waste. It's important to note that while in principle plastics can be recycled, in practice, there are many different barriers that can undermine this, and many of those barriers apply to items on this list. For example, PVC, or plastic number 3, cannot be recycled at all. If a clothing item is made with various types of plastic, synthetic materials, or with different layers, it can be hard to separate these and properly recycle them. Also, if household plastic waste is contaminated with food or other substances, the item may not be clean enough to be recycled or reused. When people think of plastics in the environment, they often think of the ocean. Photos of trash islands and sea turtles with straws in their noses may come to mind. And these are incredibly visual and important environmental issues that must be addressed as we tackle plastic pollution. But as we investigate further, we found that there are nearly invisible climate consequences as well. One of these is a reduction in heat sink. Oceans naturally act as a heat sink, cooling the overlying atmosphere above and around it. Oceans can absorb up to 90% of excess heat generated by global warming, essentially sinking the heat and cooling the atmosphere. However, as plastics enter the ocean, they're carried through the currents and 5 gyres and are broken down by the elements into microplastics. Microplastics are buoyant, with light-colored plastics reflecting back the solar radiation and thereby reducing heat absorption by ocean waters. Alternatively, darker-colored plastics enhance heat retention, contributing to rising sea temperatures, and it's currently estimated that between 1.1 and 2.4 million tons of plastic debris reach the ocean every year. Oceans also act as a carbon sink. Oceans can absorb up to 30% of released greenhouse gas emissions through what is known as the marine biological carbon pump. The pump typically exports 5 to 20 gigatons of organic carbon to the deep ocean every year. Microplastics can alter carbon flows by disrupting the carbon pump, specifically through the consumption of plastics by zooplankton. Zooplankton are incredibly important to the trophic cycle of the ocean ecosystem. Several studies have shown that zooplankton found ingesting microplastics consumed 40% less carbon biomass. As a result, the fecal pellets of zooplankton sink at a lower rate, which impacts the carbon pump. Assessment modeling found that this level of interference by microplastics pollution could be reducing this carbon export in places like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch by 30 to 65%, or the equivalent of up to 7 to 13 million metric tons of carbon per year. Zooplankton are not only important to the ocean's carbon sink, but also to oxygen production. The oceans cover approximately 70% of Earth's surface, and the planktonic communities within them are responsible for producing 50 to 80% of the world's oxygen. As zooplankton consume and absorb more microplastics and less phytoplankton, zooplankton either die off or reduce their reproduction levels very quickly, disturbing the delicate trophic cycle and leading to increased algal blooms and reduced oxygen production. This has led to a 10% decrease of oxygen levels in the North Pacific and 0.5% worldwide compared to 1960 levels. As researchers continue to study the effects of plastics in the polar ice caps, we're seeing that microplastics are being transferred through the hydrological cycle to these most remote parts of the Earth. Polar ice is formed from the saline seawater within a narrow range of temperatures close to its melting point. The hydrological cycle, which can carry plastic particles over long distances over terrestrial areas with rain or snow, has now been detected in polar regions. The presence of microplastics in polar regions has led to the alteration of albedo, the surface's ability to reflect solar radiation. Microplastics have light-absorbing properties, darkening the ice's surface, reducing reflectivity, and absorbing more solar energy, thus accelerating the melting process. Increased glacial melting is causing habitat loss, sea level rise, and an increase in seawater temperatures. The final plastics climate correlation I will cover is regarding plastics and soil degradation. Microplastics in soils directly alter the functional diversity of different enzymes that create healthy and diverse soils. Plastics make their way into soil through unintentional means, such as water runoff and sewage slide, and from intentional means, like plastic mulching, using plastic-containing fertilizers and irrigating with untreated wastewater. The presence of plastics can increase soil density, reduce water holding capacity and soil moisture, and release chemical substances that can have detrimental effects on soil ecosystem functions. Microplastics may also impact carbon cycling in soil, reducing the ability of soils to store carbon, thus affecting how much nitrous oxide and CO2 are released into the atmosphere as greenhouse gases. To briefly sum up what we've discussed today, plastics not only have an overwhelmingly negative effect on the environment, but on the climate as well. Plastics and climate change share a bi-directional relationship, with one affecting the other, and vice versa. Plastic pollution is strongly influenced by climatic factors, and it's expected to intensify with the increasing frequency of extreme weather events. Microplastics impact ocean health, carbon and heat sinks, deoxygenation, polar ice melts, and healthy soil degradation. Only through the reduction of plastic production, consumption, and pollution can we make progressive strides towards positive climate goals. And with that, I will pass the mic back to Linda, who will speak about artificial turf and its climate effects.
Thank you, Brittany. That was awesome. I really appreciated all the information you shared. Yeah, I thought I would just add a little bit about this because our plastics and toxins team is working on artificial turf, and it's something that I've been working on locally. So I wanted to talk about how it does not only hurt our health and the environment, but the climate as well. And so at all four stages, production, delivery, installation, and usage and disposal, there are climate effects. So in the production, of course, it's a petroleum product. And so each artificial turf field uses about 440,000 pounds of petroleum. Okay. Given that there are an estimated 20,000 artificial turf fields of about 3 acres each when you average different types, we're talking about many megatons of petroleum produced by plastic grass. Then the delivery, after it's been produced, it has to be transported to the site where it'll be installed. And that we're talking about big semi trucks. Currently, most of these are diesel trucks, gas trucks. There's a few new electric trucks. I hope we'll see more. But currently, they are not zero emission trucks. They're heavily polluting trucks that are delivering the plastic turf rolls. So that also releases GHG emissions. And then one part people don't often think about is that when you install artificial turf, you have to actually take out the current ground covering. You have to get a flat surface. They take off soil and vegetation. You could see in the picture on the left, they're scraping it off. And that halts the carbon sequestration process where the grass and vegetation absorb carbon. It's a very important carbon sink. And so when you take that away, you stop that process. And so you're not adding emissions at that stage, but you're stopping them getting drawn down, which is a problem. And then there's off-gassing. This was fascinating to me when I learned this, that polyethylene produces greenhouse gas emissions when it's exposed to sunlight. So as those big, just acres of plastic grass are sitting there in the sun, they're starting to off gas polyethylene. I'm sorry, they're off-gassing different types of GHGs. And those emissions increase over time. As that plastic degrades, it gets worse over time. And finally, when it's disposed of, Brittany talked about pyrolysis, that process causes it. If you chemically, quote, chemically like burn it, but it goes into landfill also, and that, while it's there, it's also continuing to off gas. So it's just bad at every stage for the climate. And of course, another thing that tomorrow's webinar, we have another one called How Nature is Vital to the Climate Fight. And so this part about disrupting that the sequestration of carbon, it also disrupts ecosystems, right, that Brittany talked about that are living there. And so that also destabilizes the climate. And if you want to learn more, that come to tomorrow's webinar at noon. And we'd love to see you there for that one. So with that, I think I'll pass it back to Brittany to continue few more slides before we get to questions and answers. And please, I've already answered a couple questions in the chat, but this would be a good time to add more questions. We also can make it a bit of a discussion. So if you want to come off camera to talk about these topics, we can promote you to panelists. So think about that. So back to Brittany.
Awesome. Thanks, Linda. All right. So we've talked about a lot of negative plastic impacts. So let's make it a little more positive. Here's how you can take action as an individual. You can refuse single-use plastics as best as you can, choose reusable options, reusable cups, tote bags, takeout containers, etc. You can keep it natural, as Linda was saying, keep lawns natural with native plants, not use artificial turf. You can join a cleanup, participate in local cleanup in your area. Staying educated is very important, learning how plastics negatively impact your community, and getting political, signing petitions, supporting local nonprofits, talking to your representatives about stronger waste policies, or volunteering for Climate Action California. So, as mentioned, I'm the co-lead for the Plastics and Toxins team. Some of what we do, we advocate for legislation and regulations to reduce the production and use of plastics. We're currently doing that with a few bills mentioned here. We push to hold manufacturers responsible for the waste they generate. We often attend committee and assembly meetings to provide input and our own voices on important legislation. And a few current areas of focus. We're following the amendment and regulation process with the Plastic Pollution Prevention and Packaging Producer Responsibility Act, SB 54. It's currently with Cal Recycle going through some public comment periods. And we're also actively supporting the creation of a plastic pollution mitigation fund, which was actually started off the back of SB 54. We are advocating against repealing the plastic bag ban. This would affect any bag before checkout. So think produce bags for bulk foods or produce items. Right now, they're typically bio bags, but this bill would try and have that repealed and be replaced with plastic bags. We also are advocating against the continued use of single-use vaporizers or vapes. Not so fun fact, the batteries in the single-use vaporizers are unfortunately starting fires when they're discarded. So there's many reasons to ban those. And we support local communities to resist the expansion of artificial turf. Just last year, some of our members assisted to remove or actually stop a chemical recycling plant from being deployed in Rohnert Park, just north of San Francisco. So those are just some of the things we do. We're always open to collaboration, to having guest speakers, to hearing what you might be interested or you want to work on. And it's a really fun time. So this is a QR code you can sign if you do want to volunteer with us. We have many different teams to volunteer for. Linda could probably tell you a little bit more about that. We also have a QR code if you want to donate to our work.
Yeah, I'll just say that I'm the volunteer coordinator. So if you do scan that QR code, then you're able to, I'll get an email basically, and I can reach out to you and we can set up a time to talk if you want to talk live with me to learn where you might fit in. I love learning about volunteers' interests and passions and skills and finding a good match for one of our mini teams. And also, if your time is tight, you work for a different climate organization or volunteer there. You also could support us. This event we're putting on free, but it does take some financing and staff time. So you can always donate to support our work at that link there. I didn't think I mentioned at the beginning, but one thing that's unique about us is we have not only the education wing of Climate Action California, that's a 501(c)(3) for those who speak the nonprofit lingo, but we also have a 501(c)(4), which means we can, do lobbying basically. And also we have a PAC, a political action committee, to elect climate champions. Because right now, so many political action committees are like funded by billionaires and they have dark money and they're trying to get um, fossil fuel supporting politicians elected. We are working really hard to get climate champions elected. So if you want to support that, that's your funding. You could choose which one of those two areas you support. So with that, yeah, we're about the halfway mark of our time. So that means we have a good amount of time for questions and answers. And apologies, I think some of the questions you all can't see, and some you can maybe, I'm not sure, but I'm going to pose the questions to Brittany, and I also can help Brittany answer questions. But I also want to recognize that in the audience, we have many people who are working on this topic. And if you'd like to, come on camera after we finish the Q&A in the chat and add more about ways that you see we could support reducing plastics use, we'd welcome that. So, Rita, I see your hand. Let me just finish the ones in the chat already, and then I will get to you. Um, so let us see what's left in here and not answered. Actually, there was one question that was a content question for Margarita. How do plastic emissions compare to emissions from cement? So I did a quick search on that and learned that cement contributes about 7 to 8% of global CO2 emissions, and plastics, about 3.5 to 3.8, but that's increasing. And so still cement's more, but that doesn't mean plastic is insignificant. So I don't know if you want to add anything about that, Brittany, or if you think that covers that question.
Yeah, I think, as one of the slides mentioned, plastic production growth is just expected to take off. ExxonMobil said they want to increase their plastic production by 80% by 2050. So it's definitely not an issue that's going away, but that doesn't mean we should forget about cement as well, because oil and gas and cement are the leading greenhouse gas emission contributors. So it was a great question.
Yeah, thank you. And so now let me promote Rika, who had her hand up. I'm going to actually, do you want to? Well, you can't talk, so I'm going to let you talk, and then you can let me know if you want to come on camera or you can just speak. So you are unmuted, Rika.
Great. I'm happy to come on camera. And
Okay.
thank you for this fantastic webinar. I learned so much. And I don't
You
see a
may
way
have,
to turn my
yeah,
camera
I'm
on.
going to promote you to panelist. It'll be
Okay,
just 1 minute. Yep, I got to
no
find your name
worries.
in the long list. Keep going.
Yeah. And while Linda's doing that, I'll just say my day job is working for Beyond Pesticides, which is a national organization that started with protecting farm workers and promoting organic agriculture and protecting farm workers from pesticides specifically. And we've been going 40 years, and we've gotten very involved at the community level in
Oh,
Sorry,
shoot.
no,
I,
it says she'll be rejoining as a panelist,
there
but
we go.
now we can hear you, Rika.
Great.
Sorry, there was
No
a little
worries.
lag.
I'll try and keep this really focused, but basically my day job is I live here in the Bay Area and I'm very passionate about these issues. And my day job at Beyond Pesticides intersects with this because my job is to work with municipalities and offer a free technical program about how to switch public management of parks and grass athletic fields to organic management to get the petrochemical pesticides and fertilizers out of the mix. And we're very focused at Beyond Pesticides on climate impacts, but doing it through the lens of pesticides and promoting organic land care, both in agriculture and in public parks. And the reason Linda and I know each other is engaging on the issue over artificial turf and bringing into the conversation the benefits of solving the underlying problems, frankly. Most municipalities and almost every school system doesn't have the resources nor the technical knowledge to use nature-based solutions to take care of grass as a organic system. And that's our expertise. We have a technical expert who's on our board who's been doing it for 30, 40 years. So what I wanted to just bring to the conversation is something that sometimes even, municipal decision makers or school decision makers don't think about. Grass fields can perform better, especially when you take away the synthetic petrochemical inputs of fertilizer in particular, not just pesticides. And Brittany, I was really impressed with how you talked about the impacts plastics have on soil. And in the same way, chemical fertilizer, synthetic fertilizer, also just stunts the entire capacity of the soil ecosystem to sequester carbon. So we are right in the middle of launching some of our Parks for Sustainable Future programs. One is going to be in University of Iowa, and we have a Division I grass soccer field, and we're going to be measuring carbon sequestration improvements as they move to an organic system. And to our knowledge, that hasn't been done in a non-agricultural setting. But I really envision and hopefully partnering with you guys to help, especially in California, to help municipalities scope land care in how they can impact their climate action plans. Because just eliminating petrochemical pesticides and synthetic fertilizers have a huge carbon footprint. And any like slow release fertilizer that has plastic in it. That's microplastics. So there's immediate benefits to ending that, but there's also the nature-based solutions that bring benefits by improving water retention, decreasing and preventing contamination by artificial turf plastics and petrochemical plastic products, and there's more. But just wanted to put that all on your radar. We're very excited to be working in the next week to launch fundraising for a model project in San Jose with the city of San Jose. Uh, and we are always available to work with anyone who wants to help engage their city or school in getting rid of both plastic fields, but really we focus on the solution with organically managed parks and soils and athletic fields. So I'll leave it there, but the intersection and how we as an organization can work with you is really critical. So we appreciate your work and everyone who's attending this evening as well.
Thank you, Rika. Appreciate you jumping in and sharing all that great information. I will move you back to be a participant now. So it might just take a minute to switch, change role to attendee. There we go. Thank you. All right, so some more questions have been rolling in, Brittany. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look or if you want me just to scan through and ask you them. Do you have a
Yeah,
preference?
I've had a chance to look a little bit. I think a couple of the questions you might be more suited to answer, but one of them, where did it go? One of them asked if we had seen the Hank Green video. There's an actual reason you can't recycle plastic. I haven't seen that video. I would love to see it. I love Hank Green. But what this says in the comments is that plastic recycling cannot compete with fresh new plastic because the precursor chemicals to fresh new plastic are basically free. Not metaphorically, but geologically and kind of economically free. So they basically come out of the ground whether you want it to or not for free. And that's very interesting. I think with the chemical recycling, we kind of saw that, or we can see that it has more harm and costs more than virgin plastic, which is really interesting. So I will definitely check out that video. Thank you for the rec.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'd like to see that too. I'm realizing that folks that are watching this recording later probably won't be able to see the chat. There's some good information shared. I'm just going to read a few of them so that people can learn from the other people here. Um, so basically, Leanne shares that the global artificial turf market size is estimated to be about US 7 billion dollars. That's already almost twice as much what it was in 2020, and is estimated to increase to US 16 billion by 2035. So the time to do something about it is definitely now. And I'll add to that that once an artificial turf field is installed, it's really hard to change it back because it's expensive. There's many different layers to the product. It's not just plastic on top, but underneath that, there's various layers, and I forget all the details, but there's cement, padding, there's, I think, piping for drainage. Like it's really complex. And so to tear that all out, to excavate it, to go back to natural grass is more expensive sometimes than just staying with artificial turf, which is really sad because artificial is extremely expensive, like $1 or $2 million per field. So we don't want to let it start. It's like a contagion. You need to try to, in your community, stop it while it's still grass, because it's much easier to shift from a conventionally managed grass field to a more organically, regeneratively managed grass field that will give better playability and better for the environment. So, yeah, that's Leanne's comment. And then I wanted to
Just a
also,
quick call out, Linda.
yeah, please.
The audience technically can't see the Q&As, so they can't
Okay.
see that's just us.
Okay, that's what I wasn't sure of. So apologies for that. That seems odd, and I don't. We moved to a bigger room for the webinar, so normally in a Zoom meeting we can. But yeah, I'll keep reading questions and comments then. Margarita asks us, do you partner or fund other nonprofits to educate hard to reach communities about your work? And if yes, I recommend United Latinos. They're at www.unitedlatinos.org. And I'd say that Climate Action California ourselves, we're such a small nonprofit, we don't have capacity to fund other ones. But you're absolutely 100% right that there needs to be resources devoted to reach hard to reach communities and under-resourced communities. One thing that another group I'm part of called Mothers Out Front did when we were trying to help prevent artificial turf from being installed in a low-income community of color in San Jose, where I live, is we hired promotoras. These are people in the community. They live in the community, and we hire them because we value their time. And then they go door to door, knock, and talk to the residents in Spanish or English, and help to let the residents know what's being proposed for their backyard, basically. And when we did this, we learned that every resident we door knocked and talked to was very appalled at this and didn't want it to happen. And we were able to have them sign a petition we brought to the county supervisors. So that was really important. And it's good to know that United Latinos does this work. And I know about them in another context. So nice, another shout out for United Latinos. Thank you, Margarita. I want to give you a chance if Margarita, you'd want to say any more live, feel free to raise your hand. We're happy to promote you to panelists to have more of a conversation. But if not, that's fine. Yeah, you'd like to. Okay, I will. And then we have spaciousness, so we'll get to the other comments too. So let's see. I need to promote Margarita. Well, first, yeah, I'll bring you right up, Margarita. Here you go. There'll be a quick lag, I think, for a minute, and then you'll be joining us. And you may need to take your own camera. Yeah, there you are. Hi, Margarita.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hello.
So just really quickly, I was looking forward to see who else is in this group. How many people are listening today? That's one question.
We currently have 30. We had more, and I think some people dropped off when we got to the Q&A.
So since I can't see the participant list, I would like to invite anyone. I'm based in Sacramento, including you ladies. I think you have an office here. I would love to meet you in person, but if I can't meet you in person, please send me a LinkedIn. There's my name, Margarita Colmenares, with an H in the middle. And I look forward to continuing the conversation because I do believe that what you're talking about is very important. But there are just so many things hitting us, this time and age, that it's hard for single issues to get out there.
Very true. Yeah. And Brittany's based in Sacramento. And like I mentioned, we have a capital team of volunteers in that area. It's not technically an office. We don't have an office. We're remote. Everybody, the volunteers and the staff all work from their homes. but we do have a presence there, and I'm sure we'd love to connect with you and continue the dialogue. So thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank
All
you.
right. You ready to go back to the attendees?
I am.
Sorry, it's so formal. Okay, here we go. Thank you.
There were a
All
couple
right.
questions in
Yeah.
here
Mhm.
that were that looked very promising. One of them, well, actually, this is more of a comment. Pauline says that a lot of people feel that the need for water of natural grass is a huge problem. And in California, that's absolutely true. But what's so interesting is that artificial turf still needs water. Do you know any more statistics around that, Linda?
Yeah, it definitely needs water because imagine the surface, it's going to get dirty, right? Whether that's just animals walking on it and doing their business, if it's, trash, people, gets dirty. Anything out in the natural environment gets dirty. So it has to be watered to clean it, but it also has to be watered to cool it. And I think Leanne made the point, or you did, about how hot artificial turf gets. Um, Volunteers have actually gone out and measured it. I think the highest reading I heard was, this is probably the outlier, but like up to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, but very typically 160 degrees or more Fahrenheit. So there's pictures of kids playing on turf that have their shoes have melted. If they fall, they get burns on their hands or their parts of their body that land on the turf. Like, it's extremely hot. So it needs to be watered to cool it. But here's a very important point about that. You can't use reclaimed or recycled water to do that, which a lot of communities are moving to reclaiming and recycling water, right, for the environment and to save water. But it has certain chemicals in it that degrade the plastic. And so the manuals the plastic grass producers give to the people who buy their products says, don't use potable water. That's drinking water. I'm sorry, opposite. Don't use reclaimed or recycled water. You must use potable drinking water. So it's a big waste of water. And where I live, the Valley Water District does not consider artificial turf to be a drought tolerant material. They give rebates to residents. I think it's up to $3,000 per lawn to replace a grass lawn with a drought tolerant alternative. They will not fund artificial or plastic grass. It's not drought tolerant. And the state legislature also affirmed that. So, yeah, that's a really good point.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, there was a question about plastics that I wanted to answer. Where did it go? Oh, here it is. Oh, yeah, from Justine. Could you expand on the current status of regional plastic regulations, particularly the progress and challenges around bans on single-use plastics and microplastics? So, as you can see from our slides, uh, there are several plastic spills going through committee. Every year, there are a number of plastic spills. Some of them are successful, like the plastic bag ban. Others, like AB 823, that was a microplastic ban on the microbeads in soap and beauty products, actually made it through the legislative process last year and onto the governor's desk, where he then vetoed it, and actually never gave a reason why. But we think that one of the biggest challenges is big oil and the money that they bring into the game. Um, Alternatively, single-use plastics are convenient. There would have to be a system put in place for reuse. And I think, and this is a personal opinion, that the pandemic set us back a bit with that for health reasons. Um, of course, as it should have. But there's definitely been some challenges around that. And so we're still working to push through several new microplastics bans and different plastics bills. So definitely stay tuned on that.
Yeah, excellent. And I wanted to address a question from um, Talitha, who wonders where the chat is. And this webinar doesn't have a chat feature. I meant the Q&A, sorry. If you don't see the Q&A, it's probably because you don't have the most up-to-date Zoom account. So you could update it for free, or you could log out and come in through zoom.us, and then you should be able to see the Q&A. But I do like your idea to add it to any recording we share. I think what we'll do is, summarize the most some of the questions and the answers. And when we send out the recording, we can provide that to those who aren't watching us live or those of you who are who can't see the Q&A. So thank you for that suggestion. I also wanted to elevate a point Leanne made about the watering, or that, yeah, that when you have to, since the artificial turfs create huge heat islands, they have to be watered, like I mentioned. But Leanne points out that that increases energy demand because transporting water in our state is actually, I learned this recently from the people who are presenting tomorrow at tomorrow's webinar, that transporting water is actually the number one user of electricity in our state. It's water so heavy, it takes so much energy to move it. So just the watering of artificial turf then uses more GHGs. So thanks for that great point and connection. And I love the synergy between today's event and tomorrow's event. They really go well together. So yeah, and then I love what Talitha said as well. And I want to pose this to you, Brittany, and see if you want to respond. But she says, I'm interested in the calling in versus calling out messaging about reducing plastics use. Some people require plastic that isn't replaceable, like medical uses. Others don't have the convenient plastic-free options that many of us who are watching this from the Bay Area enjoy. And how do you think about messaging to call folks in rather than call them out?
Yeah, I love this question. I think it's incredibly important. If you had asked me this 10 years ago, I probably would have had a different opinion. But I think that there is some plastic that absolutely has to be single use. It's just safer for people that way, especially with different medical uses. And we have to know that across the globe, there aren't a lot of plastic free options for people. I've had friends that have tried to go plastic free and they live in small towns kind of in the middle of nowhere with like one grocery store and one post office. And they've said that there's just no way that they could do it. They would go hungry. And so I think that the best way to get people involved with this is not to call them out, not to shame them, but to invite them in to just do what they can, to just do their best. I think it is, I think the idea of zero waste is an ideal. You know, it's something to inspire to, but it's not always attainable. And so I think that leaving shame out of the equation is the way to call people in and work towards solutions.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes we think we have to be perfect and then we just give up. Like it's impossible. It really is pretty impossible to live without plastics in our modern society. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to reduce. And so I love this slide that you shared, Brittany, about ways to reduce it. You gave such a great menu of options. And like each year I try to pick one new way. So like what we're doing now is like in the car, keeping in a little bag some silverware and straws and napkins so that if we go to a like a takeout restaurant like Chipotle or something, we don't pick up any of that stuff. We can just eat it. We have our own silverware that we can use. And I just feel so, it makes me so happy when I do that because I kind of think of it as like beating the system, like, ha, you can't trick me into using that plastic. I've got my own. And it makes it kind of more of a game. I mean, but again, I'm not perfect. And I think I've seen some people like there's a few like influencers are not, they're examples to us that live a very low plastic use life. And I respect that entirely. But I also know, especially if you're challenged with time, if you work multiple jobs, like it's just, it can be harder. And so we don't want to expect people to be perfect. We want to reduce. Everybody could probably do something that lowers their use. And if we all do that, we're gonna get there eventually. So that's what I would say to
Exactly.
that.
I should
Yeah.
say just a little backstory. 3 years prior to the pandemic, I was completely zero waste. For 3 years, I was that person where all my trash fit in a jar. I was obnoxious. And the pandemic actually allowed me to reassess that and realize that maybe that actually wasn't healthy. I actually wasn't getting proper nutrients. Um, my mom and I we went to a grocery store and she wanted to buy cauliflower that was wrapped in plastic. We got in a huge fight. There's just no reason for that. It's ridiculous. And so it's absolutely an ideal. No one needs to be perfect. There totally are ways to cheat the system and feel good about getting involved and doing better without being perfect.
Yeah, I love that story, Brittany. Thanks for sharing that. And then Margarita asks, can you share a backstory to 823? I'm not sure what that refers to. Is that one of the bills that you're
Yes.
working on?
So that was the bill, the microplastics bill that made it to the governor's desk last year and got vetoed. So this bill, I believe it was authored by Borner, uh, was specifically going to ban glitter and microplastics, microbeads in makeup products and soap products. And there was already a plan to introduce, and there already exists many different makeup and beauty products and soap products that don't have these ingredients in them. So it would just ban the sale of them in California. And it made it through every single part of the legislature until it hit the governor's desk. And again, we still really don't know why it got vetoed. He did send out a letter, but there wasn't really anything on it. So, you know, we are going to try. I believe Five Gyres Institute is was helping to co-sponsor that bill. I believe they are going to try and bring that back. But that's the story.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And maybe you can go back to the final slide just to have that to be the last one on here. But I wanted to just add to that about the governor vetoing it. And, I don't know what he was thinking, but I do know that this artificial turf and the bigger than that, the petroleum, that plastics petroleum industry is, a multi-billion dollar industry, right? So they have lobbyists, they make contributions, they really influence our political system. They basically buy the laws they want or they stop the laws they want. It's why it's so important that folks like you are educating yourselves and you're educating others and you're speaking up because it's really, we need people versus all that money. Where we were in Santa Clara County fighting artificial turf, we were trying to get a ban in our county. The one of the head, maybe the CEO or one of the top people there at Tenkate organization flew their person out to meet with the supervisors and who knows why, but they voted they lost by one vote, getting a ban. And I think we can't underestimate the reasons why legislation is vetoed often isn't because the science isn't there and all the good reasons. There's political influence in our system, and that's why we have to elect climate champions and environmental champions. That's one thing that we're really working hard at Climate Action California to identify who can't be bought by the industry, who will do the right thing for the climate and for people's health and the environment. So just wanted to add that piece. And then there's some more questions and comments in the chat. Back to the use of water, Rika adds that when you manage grass organically, like athletic fields versus like the conventional way, it uses 25% less water. So that's a dramatic reduction. And then the reclaimed or purple pipe water can easily be used for landscape irrigation. So yeah, that's a really good point. And then Leanne wants us to, and you know about this, Brittany, you've met with these folks. A group of parents are battling the artificial at Crocker Riverside Elementary in Sacramento. Um, and actually, maybe that's different than the Crocker Field in
No,
San
so that
Francisco.
it's just the same name,
It's
which is so
ironic.
funny. So Leanne, there's also a Crocker Park in San Francisco, in which the city wants to put in artificial turf, and the a few different residents, actually, really the entire population of people who live around the park, are trying to get that banned and try to not have that happen. And so we have been speaking to them. I think the people we had spoken with has said that the mayor in particular wants to see artificial turf implemented around San Francisco. But I'll have to look into this Crocker Riverside Elementary in Sacramento.
Yeah,
And
good.
as she said that there's a petition available.
Yep. So when we send out the recording to everybody who registered, we'll also send some resources like the link to that petition. I think it's Bob in San Francisco who's leading the campaign against the Crocker Field there
Yes.
turf. Yeah. So he's got a petition as well. So we'll share those resources. And thanks, Glenn has said he sent resources. So that's terrific. And then also Priya made a comment that natural grass turf, she makes the comment they can get very wet. And so she'd like to hear how we tackle the wetness factor, like the weather factors, other nature-based solutions or innovations. We might need to promote Rika back to being a panelist or one of the other people on here, but what I can say is that I think that it's true that sometimes when there's very, very heavy rains, natural grass fields need to be paused for use for a while. And sometimes they put them like on, I guess they kind of hold them to be like restore them. They put them like out of use for maybe a month or two or however long. So that is true. But I want to point out that with increasing numbers of high heat events, extreme heat, that artificial turf fields also have to be paused from being used because they literally could very seriously hurt or even there are deaths from students playing on artificial turf from heat exhaustion, heat stroke. One of the members of the local group has researched this extensively. It's alarming how many youth, especially, have died playing like because of the heat exhaustion on artificial turf. So, yes, natural grass fields may have to close when it's wet. Artificial turf fields do close when it's wet as well. I mean, they can't absorb that water, so they also are affected. So yeah, but nothing is perfect. But I think when you organically manage the grass, it's designed to really drain well, and it's appropriate to that climate. So I think it reduces how much time is lost to that. And I don't see if anyone has a hand up to speak on that. So I'm going to move on. Thank you, Grace, for the wonderful questions in the chat.
Yeah, there was another question by Leanne
Yeah.
that we could probably both answer. If one would like to support bills that regulate or ban plastic products, is there a way to keep track of them? So, Climate Action California does a great job of keeping track of them. And there's a list of high priority bills that we're tracking on the website. Is that correct?
Yeah, it may not quite be there yet, but we're in the process of putting up on our website like the top priorities of each team, the bills they're working on, and like a description. So if it's not there yet, it's going to be there soon. But it's all done by volunteers, so it may not be ready quite yet. But that's one good place. If you join one of our policy teams, also like our plastics toxins team that Brittany's the co-lead of, we have an internal build tracker. And that, follows the bills and has lots of information. And that's another way to really be informed about what's happening. Yeah, we train volunteers how to use Ledge Info and like you can do a search on plastic and see all the plastic bills that are going on and where they are in the process. So highly recommend getting involved with us if you want to work on the advocacy side, like the policies, legislation, and regulation. That's what we specialize in at Climate Action California. We're especially focused on the state level. We have some volunteers working locally and some federally, but it's mostly at the state level. And one of our volunteers here, I see, Pauline is saying she'd love to see plastic clamshells banned. They're so prevalent even in good low carbon food stores, and there are alternatives using cardboard cartons with small, thin plastic windows. So yeah, anything you want to add about that, Brittany?
No, I 100% agree. I think that would be fantastic if they're banned. I know that um, there's a there was a styrofoam ban, but it's so interesting with these bans. They only apply to certain places, certain things. And so there's really no statewide ban on even the plastic bag or clamshells. And so that is something that we could potentially speak to legislators about. I love that.
Yeah. And one thing I do is I can be a little bit obnoxious, but if I'm like at the counter and getting takeout, like at a grocery store or something, like from the deli, I often ask them, "Oh, do you have something alternative to that plastic thing?" I probably should bring my own containers thinking about it, but sometimes they do have like a cardboard something instead. And so I always just try to ask. But yeah, we need to get them banned though, because not everybody's going to do it. And I don't want to inconvenience the workers either when they're busy and stressed. So. But I also want to bring up a question that Margarita asked. And so we're going all over the place because the questions are all over the place. But who are the climate champion candidates in the California governor's race? And what I want to say to that is if you join Climate Action California and get on our mailing list, we are actually having an internal poll right now of our members to see what our members think who are the climate champions. But we narrow the field down because we wanted to exclude any candidates that are taking oil and gas money. There's something called well, actually, yeah, some of them have taken the No Fossil Fuel Monies Pledge, but we also tried to research, even if they haven't taken the pledge, have they taken any money from the oil and gas industry? And we identified four candidates that we don't believe they have. There's also, of course, I think, around 80 candidates. I'm talking about the top polling candidates when I say that, only four. I'm sure some of the people that no one's ever heard of maybe don't take that money either. But so please, if you want to vote, that poll is still open. We're going to be determining our endorsement very soon, though. And you will see. I don't want to speak on behalf of the organization. It's our volunteers that decide, not me. So, but yeah, we'll see who comes out on top. But if you did watch the debate yesterday, this topic came up, and I think it's very informative. All right. And then let's see. Yeah. So I think I want to make sure we don't just only do natural grass. There's a lot of good questions about that, but I'm skimming for other topics, and then we'll come back to natural grass. But here's one from Leanne. How do we tackle misleading advertising when it comes to plastic content? For example, tampons, which are marketed as 100% cotton core, can actually have polyester in them. How was that ever allowed? Do you have any ideas about tackling this misleading advertising, Brittany?
Yes, what a great question. I mean, it's greenwashing 101, truly. So there are currently several bills going through the Natural Resources Assembly that are tackling environmental advertising with misleading claims. Some of them focus on like sunscreen that say that they're reef safe and they're not, and others focus on materials that say that they can be recycled and they're not. So it's these bills are very specific. Unfortunately, they're not large reaching. So I haven't seen one specifically for that issue yet, but people are starting to realize that greenwashing is a problem and what they're being sold isn't correct. And so people are taking steps to correct this. I think it's going to take a while. And I think we just have to be, unfortunately, very vigilant as consumers to what we are consuming and and take a real hard look at that label.
Great. Brittany, I'm thinking since it's 7:03 that we might want to wrap up here. I will say that Priya asked a question and Enrica provided a great answer. So we can summarize that in the follow-up. But I want to respect people's time. We're at the end of the hour. And any final comments you want to make, Brittany, before we officially say goodbye?
I just want to say I've loved this conversation. Plastics is my passion. If any of you are interested in getting involved with us, I would love to talk to you more about what you're interested in and how we can, work together to bring your passion into Climate Action California.
Yeah, I'd love to have you join the plastic toxins team in particular. So, yeah. So, yes, I want to thank our presenter, Brittany. Brittany, I appreciate all the time you put into preparing this presentation. You did a lot of research along with your co-lead, Kate Zimmer, who's currently not available to speak tonight, but you two of you put in so much research and then did a beautiful job on the slides and answering the questions. I just want to thank you so much for all the time you put in as a
Thank
volunteer to do
you.
this tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate it. My pleasure.
Yay. And everybody who came, thank you so much for your interest. We promised the recording, anybody who registered, and we had like, I think 120 or so registrants. So there's a lot of interest in this topic. And everybody who's watching on recording, thank you for your interest. And we'll wrap up here and say good night. Thank you, everybody.